Welcome to this episode of Mentors at Your Benchside, the podcast giving you advice, tips and tools for getting the most out of your research. I'm Laura Grassi, and today I'll be talking to you about how to cope with sweaty hands when you're taking off and putting on gloves in the lab. Gloves protect the skin from numerous hazards lurking in research labs. There are many types of gloves available depending on your needs, whether you want protection from chemical or biological hazards or simply to prevent surface contamination. However, a very noticeable side effect of using gloves is the dreaded sweaty glove hands. Perhaps you've faced the embarrassing situation of sweaty handshakes, not ideal, or soaking your keyboard, paper, or other equipment with your sweaty hands. And the most difficult task of all is trying to get on another pair of gloves with sweaty glove hands, which can become almost impossible. And while these sweaty glove hand problems are annoying, they can create a bigger problem. Prolonged exposure to sweat, coupled with the frequent hand washing required in a lab, makes your skin more likely to chap and crack. This can exacerbate skin conditions such as eczema and also lead to the development of irritated skin, rashes, or even more troublesome conditions such as dermatitis. Gloves can't be avoided during laboratory and research work. However, there are some things you can try to reduce or circumvent this sweaty problem. So here are our top tips to banish sweaty glove hands. Tip number 1. Choose your material wisely. The choice of material for your gloves is important, not only to help with sweat, but also to avoid more serious issues including allergic reactions and dermatitis. The prevalence of latex allergies in healthcare workers has been shown to be more than double that in the general population. Therefore, you should use non-latex gloves and powder-free gloves if possible. For more information on the different types of gloves available, see the episode description to a link to an article on the different types of gloves and when to use them. Tip number 2. Topical medications to counter sweaty glove hands. There are lots of topical medications you can try to counter perspiration and skin irritation caused by the frequent use of lab gloves. Formaldehyde lotions and aluminium chlorohydrate are known to denature keratin and thus occlude the sweat pores on the hands, leading to reduced sweat release. Speak to your pharmacist if you're looking for a solution like this. Tip number 3. Use fabric glove liners. One strategy to avoid the sweaty glove hand problem is to wear a fabric glove liner. There are a variety of glove liners available, including fingerless gloves and cotton full hand liners. But speak to your lab manager to see if they recommend any, or even if they have any that you can use. Tip number 4. Change your gloves regularly. The most convenient method to avoid sweaty hands is to change your gloves regularly. It is helpful to wash and moisturize your hands after removing gloves. And it might be handy to keep a stash of small towels so you can thoroughly dry your hands as well. Tip number 5. Use 70% ethanol or hand coolers. Most labs have a stock of 70% ethanol, which as well as being used to disinfect, denature protein, and dissolve lipids, can also be used to cool down gloved hands and prevent sweating. Apply the ethanol to your gloved hand, and after a few seconds, you should notice a nice cooling sensation. Don't be tempted to use 70% ethanol on ungloved hands because it might lead to dry skin conditions. Hand coolers are devices that can be worn on hands to prevent sweat, and although they can't be used while wearing gloves, they can be used during glove-free periods to help cool the hands. Tip number 6. Have some glove-free time. It is also critical to have some glove-free time to avoid sweaty hands. You can use this time to plan your experiments, catch up on reading, or actually fill in your lab book. Tip number 7. Remember that size matters. I use a slightly larger size of glove than the actual size of my hand. This gives those little pores a bit more space so they don't perspire as much. It's also easier to change gloves regularly when the size is a little larger than required. Tip number 8. Get baby soft hands. Some people use baby powder on their hands as it is effective at absorbing sweat. Given that there have been some safety concerns raised over the prolonged use of talcum powder, you might want to consider an alternative such as baking soda or cornstarch. Tip number 9. Hydrate. This is general advice to help you sweat less and seems a little counterintuitive. Drinking water keeps our body cool and reduces the core body temperature. More moisture means less moisture released and fewer sweaty palms. Just don't drink in the lab. I hope these tips for dealing with sweaty glove hands are useful to fellow glove wearers. If you have any other top tips for banishing those sweaty glove hands, visit the original article. You can find a link to it in the episode description and leave a comment. So that's it for how to manage sweaty hands in the lab. Check out the episode description for links to related articles and resources. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to get more help and advice from mentors at your benchside.